Welcome to Weekly Pulse. I'm your host, Lorenzo Reyes. It's a fresh year, fresh decade, and a fresh start for a couple of prominent franchises in the NFL. The Cowboys, Panthers, and Giants all found their new head man. From McCarthy and Rule to Judge, we dive into how each makes sense, or maybe doesn't, for each team. Everyone's eyes were also on Tuscaloosa this week when Tua Tagovailoa made his decision to enter the NFL draft. So where's he going to go? I take a look at the top quarterbacks and where they might land in April. And speaking of college football, I can all but guarantee next Monday's national championship between LSU and Clemson is going to be epic. Seriously, this may be the best one we've seen since the '06 Rose Bowl. Paul Meyerberg sets it all up and provides his prediction for the game. Are you tired of predictions yet? I'm not. We had our NBA insider Jeff Zillgitt in the studio this week, and he provides his take on where some of the top stars could land before the trade deadline. And to finish the show, our top reporters predict who's going to dominate the sports world in the 2020s. Let's roll.
No way are the Timberwolves trading Karl Anthony Towns this season. He's early in his contract. They still have 3 years of trying to figure out how to put more talent around Karl Anthony Towns. I think they would be selling way too early if they decided to move him. Now, with all that said, I'm sitting here saying they're not going to trade him. If the great deal came along for Karl Anthony Towns this season, and it's one of those, here's an offer you can't refuse, then obviously the Timberwolves would have to listen and maybe make a move. But everything I'm hearing from that Timberwolves front office and other executives around the league is that they want to stick with Big Cat. They want to see how this roster develops around him, what kind of players they can put around him. Yes, it's been a disappointing season for the Timberwolves, especially after a promising start. But they are so early into Karl Anthony Towns' contract, there's no reason to move him right now. If we're in the same position with the Timberwolves 2 years from now, a year and a half from now, then it might be a different scenario. But right now, Karl Anthony Towns is staying with the Timberwolves. If you're a Portland Trail Blazers fan, acquiring Kevin Love would make you a better team. I had heard that the Blazers were interested in making a deal for Kevin Love in the summertime. They ultimately made a deal for Hassan Whiteside, and that minimized their need for Kevin Love. The Blazers, though, did not get off to a good start this year. Don't forget, this was a team that played in the conference finals a year ago, and now they're going to struggle to get into the playoffs. And so that will make Love's presence on that team, it will definitely help them. And Hassan Whiteside has an expiring contract, and so the Blazers won't have to deal with Hassan Whiteside's contract and money after this season. And who knows, they could maybe move Hassan Whiteside at the trade deadline as well. But there will be other teams, maybe possibly the Phoenix Suns, looking for Kevin Love. And if you're a team that's a playoff team trying to solidify their position, you can do worse than Kevin Love. He's a guy who played on a championship team, has been an all-star, and in the right situation, he can give you close to a double-double on a nightly basis. I get it if you're a Pistons fan and don't want to trade Andre Drummond because there's an attachment. He's an all-star. He's led you to a playoff appearance. But let's look at Andre Drummond's contract situation and understand how it makes it difficult for the Pistons to pay him the kind of money that Drummond is going to get on the free agent market. Andre Drummond can opt out of his contract after this season, and he's going to be looking at a deal that pays him nearly $30 million a year. The Pistons are already invested in a long-term deal with Blake Griffin. I'm not sure that they want to put another $30 million plus a season into Andre Drummond. It might be time for this Pistons team to move on from Drummond, get something for him before he leaves in free agency for nothing, and maybe accelerate this rebuild that is going on in Detroit, or at least a rebuild that looks like it's going to happen in Detroit with Dwayne Casey as coach. I'm not positive the Lakers are going to trade Kyle Kuzma, but is it worth the Lakers listening to offers? Without a doubt. If you look at the Lakers roster, the one guy who has some trade value on that team that they're willing to part with, it's Kyle Kuzma. Now the question is, what can they extract from another team for Kuzma? And I'm not sure the Lakers have enough assets after Kuzma to make the kind of deal they want. There's been some talk of doing a deal with the Sacramento Kings for Bogdan Bogdanovic, but I'm not exactly sure the Kings are willing to part with Bogdanovic just for Kyle Kuzma straight up. Bogdanovic would make the Lakers a demonstrably better team with his shooting, his offense, but that's a deal Sacramento is not going to make straight up. And again, the Lakers don't always have the assets to maybe pull off the kind of deal that makes them a better team by moving Kuzma.
After a long, drawn-out breakup with Jason Garrett, Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys finally have their next man. According to multiple reports, Mike McCarthy will become the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. The former Green Bay Packers head coach was out of football last year, got fired late in the 2018 season. But this is a smart hire, and here's why. This is a roster that's got a lot of talent, but they need someone to help them get over the top. Mike McCarthy has a track record. He developed that Packers team. They made it to the playoffs 8 times in 13 seasons. He won the Super Bowl. He is a great quarterback whisperer. He's the guy that Dak Prescott needs to help him consistently execute and become an elite quarterback. The question will be if Jerry Jones can stay out of his way. But I think in hiring McCarthy, this shows you how desperate Jerry is to win. And Mike McCarthy is a guy that former players tell me leads with a blend of charisma, but he's also reserved. His favorite saying is conflict is good. He likes getting guys together, hashing it out, figuring out how to solve problems. And the Cowboys, who have only 5 divisional titles and only 3 playoff wins in the last 20 years, certainly need a problem solver.
Though it may have been a surprise to both NFL and college football fans that Baylor's Matt Rule took the Carolina Panthers head coaching job on Tuesday instead of the New York Giants, given that he's from New York City and had long been rumored as a candidate there, it's no surprise at all that he has eventually found himself as an NFL head coach. Rule has long had interest from the NFL, even going back to Temple, the first program he rebuilt from 2-10 the first season to an AAC title contender by the time he left for Baylor, where he did it all over again. The reason the NFL has been interested in Rule is that he is a no gimmicks, no nonsense coach who runs a pro-style offense and has proven that he can build and adapt to the personnel around him. He's a developer, he runs a solid, sound, defensive-oriented scheme, and it's no surprise that NFL teams looked at him among this group of great young college coaches as a guy who would fit really well in the NFL.
Well, it's a day of big blue blindsides, and really it all depends on what perspective you're coming from, who was actually blindsided. First, it seemed like the Giants were when Matt Rule decided to sign with the Carolina Panthers as their next head coach. That lasted for maybe about an hour, and then the stunning news that the Giants had their head coach, and that's Joe Judge, 38-year-old special teams coordinator for the New England Patriots. Giants dipping into the Belichick tree. Also, Judge worked with Nick Saban at Alabama. He has 3 Super Bowl rings, 2 national championship rings, and really the respect of 2 of the greatest coaches in recent memory, really in the history of pro and college football. The Giants have requested permission to talk to Jason Garrett. He is still under contract with the Cowboys. So at this point, they would like to bring Garrett in and pick his brain to see if he wants to be the offensive coordinator with the Giants. Could that somehow trickle down to the position coaches? Would that make Bill Callahan comfortable enough to come here and coach the offensive line? Then does that open the door for Wade Phillips as the defensive coordinator? So right now, the Yankees and the Giants have their judge. It'll be very interesting to see what the jury has to say moving forward.
Go Tigers! LSU and Clemson, 14-0 versus 14-0. The cream of the crop from the SEC, a team with 6 wins against opponents then ranked in the top 10.
Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5.
Headlined by the Heisman Trophy winner and Joe Burrow and owners of the most prolific offense in college football. against a program looking to defend its national title and write a page into the sport's history by winning 3 of the last 4 championships. This is a dream title game matchup, and let me explain why. Let's start with the quarterbacks. There has never been a championship game with a QB pairing like this. Maybe the closest approximation was early 2006 when Matt Leinart and Southern California faced off with Vince Young in Texas. That's a good one. This is better.
Wow.
Burrow has made one of the great single-season leaps by any quarterback in recent history in going from an overlooked senior starter, already given the dreaded game manager label, to the Heisman winner and very likely the number 1 overall pick in the 2020 NFL Draft. I just hope he likes Cincinnati. On the other side is the number 1 overall pick in 2021 in Clemson sophomore Trevor Lawrence, who has already crafted a serious legacy as he heads into the final game of his second season. It's number 1 versus number 1, and I am telling you, we have never seen anything like this, especially when you talk about the stakes at play. And while we're talking numbers, it's the nation's number 1 offense, LSU, against the nation's number 1 defense in Clemson. You saw what LSU was about during the Peach Bowl rout against Oklahoma when Burrow and the offense just embarrassed the Sooners with 49 points in the first half. They scored 63 overall. Very scary. Here's what's even scarier. LSU teammates said after the game that Burrow told them the night before the OU matchup that the offense would score 70. They scored 63. Burrow thought they'd score 70. That's frightening. Clemson, nonetheless, will provide a completely different challenge on defense. For one, there's the fact that defensive coordinator Brent Venables lives for moments like these, and he has a track record of milking out elite defensive performances under the bright lights against the best teams in college football. Unlike Oklahoma, and this is important, Clemson and their secondary can go toe-to-toe with LSU's receiver core and win those 50-50 battles that have come to define the Tigers' explosiveness. OU could not. Clemson can. Another major asset in Clemson's corner is just experience. It's been more than 2 years since the Tigers lost a game.
Wow.
You know what? That seems like an important note to keep in mind. You saw during that comeback against Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl that it could be that Clemson has just forgotten what it means to lose or what it takes to lose. So what's the key when Tigers meet Tigers on Monday night in New Orleans? For LSU, it's taking care of the football, finding big plays downfield, because they need to avoid having to churn out extended drives against this Clemson defense. For Clemson, it's keeping Trevor Lawrence clean after he took a beating against Ohio State, and finding a way, somehow, some way, to rattle Burrow without taking assets away from their secondary. Look for scoring, look for explosive plays, look for elite, high-level talent, and when all is said and done, after 60 minutes or maybe overtime, look for Clemson to find a way to derail LSU's offense just enough to take home another national championship.
While nobody ever thought that Tagovailoa would be a senior at Alabama, a lot of things changed after his hip injury in November against Mississippi State. Because potentially that injury, which is a significant serious injury, could cost him in the NFL draft, some people thought that he might try to get healthy, come back to school, play one more season, dominate like he has the last couple years, and then maybe be the number 1 pick overall in the NFL draft, which this year seems probable to be Joe Burrow from LSU. I still think that Tagovailoa, despite the injury, will get picked pretty high. So it is a good decision for him to leave now. And assuming the medicals, the doctors say that he is going to have a full recovery and be a productive athlete like he was before, I don't think he's going to have any problem. He's going to make a lot of money, and some team is going to take a chance on him. But certainly, as Nick Saban said, one of the most impactful players in his time at Alabama.
The latest quarterback domino of the NFL draft fell, and I think it makes this class so fascinating. Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa announced that he will forego his final season and declare for the NFL draft in 2020. I don't think this shakes up anything necessarily at the top of the board. After the season that Joe Burrow had at LSU, in which he won the Heisman, I think it's no secret that he's likely the number 1 overall pick to the Cincinnati Bengals, but I think now we have to look at the picks between number 3 and number 6 overall. As it stands, right now we have Tagovailoa going number 5 to the Dolphins, and that makes sense. The Dolphins have long needed a franchise quarterback, and Tagovailoa has some of the traits, accuracy, leadership, and all of that the Dolphins coaching staff desires in the position. And it's no secret that the Dolphins have been intrigued by Tagovailoa. Just look at the Citrus Bowl. When Tagovailoa wasn't even playing as he recovers from his hip injury, the Dolphins sent a massive contingent to Orlando to watch the team play Michigan that included the owner and the general manager. If there's one player who's impacted most by Tua declaring, it's Herbert. I think in a scenario where Tagovailoa remained at Alabama, Herbert would have been a potential target for the Dolphins at number 5. He almost certainly would have been the second quarterback taken off the board. The key date to look for is the NFL Scouting Combine. That's when NFL doctors and team doctors will have a chance to examine the evaluation and look at whether or not there are going to be potential long-term issues for Tua in the pros. But if everything checks out, if everything looks good in the Combine and then the checkup before the draft, I think there's no question that Tua is the second player taken off of the quarterback board.
Now that we're in January, the coaches poll is sure to get interesting, with top 25 teams facing serious threats in conference play. Still, we've got some undefeated teams that continue to show their stock here in 2020. Looking at the poll at first glance, a team that stands out in the top 25 is Texas Tech. The Red Raiders are coming off a Final Four campaign, and they don't have the same ammunition that they did last year, but defense is making this team a Big 12 contender against challengers Baylor and Kansas. Another team to keep an eye on near the middle of the poll is Dayton. This is a team hailing from a power mid-major conference in the Atlantic 10, but one that could be very dangerous come March based on depth and go-to scoring. Then when we get into the top 10, the two teams that stand out right now are San Diego State and Auburn. These are undefeated teams that we certainly weren't talking about at the beginning of the season. The Aztecs are playing exceptional defense right now, shooting well from beyond the arc and getting a big boost offensively from transfer Malachi Flynn. If Gonzaga loses in league play, can San Diego State and Auburn, could they potentially leapfrog Blue Bloods to get to number 1? It's going to take a lot to turn January success into March success.
How fortunate for the NFL to go from one decade to the next and have a new generation of superstars poised to take them to new heights. And I'm talking about Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Deshaun Watson as the three quarterbacks who would define the future of the NFL. Now, you can make a case for Dak Prescott too, but let's see them win in the playoffs. But as it stands right now, you look at the magnificent starts that Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes have had to their careers, and it's breathtaking and it's exciting. It just kind of fuels anticipation for more greatness down the road. We had our Tom Brady versus Peyton Manning rivalry. Well, now guess what? We're going to have a Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes rivalry, a Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson rivalry, a Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson rivalry. We'll see how it all shakes out, but I'm here to say that as we're standing here a decade from now, we'll look back on those guys as the defining players.
When you look at the NBA, the league is in great shape when you look at talent on the court. You're still going to have some years left of Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and then you look at the next generation of guys, whether it's a Trae Young, a Luka Doncic. They're young, they're going to be around. If I'm going to single in on one person who is going to dominate for the next decade, I'm looking at Milwaukee's Giannis Antetokounmpo. We don't even know what his potential or ceiling is right now. He still has tons of room to improve. He can become a better outside shooter, especially from three-point range. His playmaking is getting better, but he can become a better passer, can become a better free throw shooter. We just don't know what kind of player he can become, but what he has shown us is the ability to get better season after season. He has the ability to win multiple MVPs over the next decade. He already has one MVP from last season. He's even better this year than he was last season. Now there's competition for the award, but Giannis might even be the best player in the NBA, the way he plays today, the ease at which he scores, and his ability to also play defense on the other end of the court. And so that's the guy I'm looking at. His body type, the way he's built, he hasn't been injured very often. He looks like the kind of player who can play the course of the next decade and still be an all-star 10 years from now. But in between those 10 years, I expect Giannis to do tons of great things on the court. Now, whether he wins a championship or not, there are a lot of factors that go into that. But when it comes to individual play, he's dominating right now. He'll win more MVPs, and it looks like he's the kind of player who can dominate for the next decade.
Well, I think LeBron James will be the player in 2020, but as far as the player in the 2020s decade, LeBron James, I'm not saying that he's washed right now, but he's 34 years old. He's in his 17th season. He only has a few more years left in his career. It's all about going to be Luka Doncic with the Dallas Mavericks. He already won the Rookie of the Player of the Year award. He along with Russell Westbrook and Oscar Robertson, have become the only players in NBA history to average a triple-double with 30-point performances in a calendar month. And here's the scary part. He's just getting started. He's just 20 years old. He's even pleasantly surprised the former Maverick star Dirk Nowitzki, who told me that he thought coming into the second season he was going to struggle because of all the extra attention that he was going to get on team scouting reports, but he's been able to rise above that. And the thing is, he is just getting started.
In all honesty, the main story in 2020, 21, 22, and they kind of work side by side, is Nick Saban, his tenure ending in Alabama. Who replaces him? Where does Alabama go? Do they stay at the top? At the same time, you look at Clemson as a program that has been dominant. They won last year. They may win it again this year. They go into 2020, 2021 with an elite coach in Dabo Swinney, the quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. They've got the best recruiting class in the country right now. The last few years of college football on the field has been dominated by Alabama versus Clemson. I have no doubt at all from 2020 through the middle part to the end of 2020 is the same storyline will be Alabama versus Clemson to see who can be the dominant program in the sport.
You know, we have to look at one of the most dominant programs, and that's with Duke basketball. You know, Coach Mike Krzyzewski has, one of the most storied careers, in the history of the sport with everything that he's been able to do. You're looking at 5 national championships and just everything he did with Team USA with winning gold medals. What's going to happen as far as his successor goes? I think that's sort of the big thing here. Who's going to take over, in Durham once he does decide to retire?
I think the biggest storyline in sports of the 2020s is going to be how people consume sporting events, because we are used to a television model, a cable model, and yet people's attention spans and the way they consume all content on media is so different and evolving and constantly changing faster than I think a lot of these sports leagues are necessarily evolving. And you've seen this year a lot of concern and consternation about ratings in the NBA. And I think all of these things are going to bring up questions that leagues, professional, college, whoever are going to have to grapple with. Are seasons too long? Are games too long? Are people's attention spans big enough to keep them invested and interested over these really long seasons?
I think the Dodgers are going to be the team of the next decade. Hey, they won 7 straight division titles. They're halfway to what the Atlanta Braves accomplished. Nobody thought anybody could win 14 straight division titles again. But here are the Dodgers, halfway there with 7. They have over, 952 wins, more wins than anybody in the decade. They should win a World Series. So I think we have a chance to have a team of the decade. It's going to be the Los Angeles Dodgers. And if I have to pick one individual, maybe I'll go with Walker Buehler, who has got a makings of being the next Clayton Kershaw and have several Cy Young awards this year.
If you thought Wild Card Weekend was one for the ages, it's because it was. For the first time since 1991, all 4 games finished within 1 score. We had 3 road teams win, 2 overtimes, and the shocking departures of the Patriots and Saints. So what does the divisional round have for an encore? Saturday's action kicks off with Kirk Cousins heading to the Bay to take on Jimmy G and the Niners. In primetime, Lamar takes center stage against a red-hot Titans team. Sunday slate starts with the best quarterback matchup of the weekend with Deshaun Watson dueling Patrick Mahomes. And to finish off, we have a rivalry that always provides memorable moments or controversy. Seahawks, Packers. I just know something crazy is going to happen here. But as good as these games may be, I have to admit the national championship on Monday could top them all. Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow, Clemson, LSU in the Superdome. So sit back and enjoy 3 stellar days of football. The last time you'll get to do that until next fall. Stick with Weekly Pulse, your heartbeat to what's trending in sports. Hey sports fans, if you want to see more videos like this, check out some of our other ones right here. And if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and stick around for more from USA Today Sports.